Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves.
There's something about being on a cruise ship that creates a false sense of security. You're surrounded by people, thousands of them. There's nowhere to go. You're in the middle of the ocean. Nothing should be able to reach you out there. But these 5 stories suggest otherwise. These were all submitted by viewers and listeners who experienced something deeply wrong on the water, something that in some cases never got explained. We're starting with a story called The Cabin That Was Already Occupied. It's one of those slow-building accounts where everything seems fine on the surface, until you realize something has been sleeping next to you the entire time. The bed was warm when I got in, not warm like the heating was on, warm like someone had just been lying there. I pulled the sheets back and there was an indentation in the mattress, a clear body shape pressed into the foam, and the pillow still had a crease running down the middle like someone's head had been resting there moments before I opened the door. This was my first cruise, a 7-night Mediterranean trip out of Barcelona. My wife had booked it for our anniversary, and the ship was one of those massive ones. 18 decks, 4,000 passengers, more restaurants than some small towns. Our cabin was on deck 9, port side, an interior room with no window, just a small square box with a bathroom and a TV. I told my wife about the warm bed and she laughed it off, said housekeeping probably sat down while making it up. That made sense. I believed that for about 2 days. On the second night, I woke up at 3 in the morning to use the bathroom. When I came back, my wife was asleep on her side of the bed, but the sheets on my side were pulled back, tucked down like someone had folded them open for me. I hadn't done that. I'd gotten up quickly when I felt the urge. The sheets had been flat when I left. I stood there in the dark for maybe 10 seconds, just looking at my side of the bed. Then I got back in. The third night, I woke up to breathing. Not my wife's breathing. She was facing me, mouth closed, completely silent. The breathing was coming from behind me, from the wall side of the bed. Slow, measured, like someone sleeping deeply. I didn't move. I lay there for what felt like 20 minutes, and the breathing never stopped. When I finally turned over, there was nothing there, just the wall. But the breathing continued for another few seconds after I turned, then faded out like someone had slowly moved further away. I asked the front desk the next morning if someone had been in our cabin before us. The woman behind the counter checked and said the room had been unoccupied for the previous sailing. Not just empty between guests, completely unbooked. No one had stayed in that cabin for the entire voyage before ours. I asked why. She said she didn't know. She said sometimes cabins just don't get assigned. On the 5th night, I couldn't sleep at all. I was lying on my back staring at the ceiling when I felt the mattress shift. Not a big movement, just a subtle compression on the edge of the bed near my feet, like someone had sat down. I looked and there was nothing, but the mattress stayed compressed. I could see it, the fabric pulling down in a shape that looked like a seated person. I woke my wife up. She turned on the light. The compression was gone. The last night, I set up my phone to record video while we slept. I propped it on the TV stand facing the bed. In the morning, I checked the footage. Most of it was nothing. Dark room, 2 shapes under the covers. But at around 2:40 in the morning, the covers on my side of the bed slowly pulled back. Not quickly, not like a draft caught them. They folded back neatly, smoothly, the way someone would fold them back to get in. Then the mattress compressed. You could see it on camera. And then, and this is what I keep coming back to, the covers pulled back up, slowly, tucking in around a shape that wasn't visible. For about 40 minutes, there were 3 shapes in that bed. I showed the footage to guest services. They watched it without expression. The manager said they'd look into it and offered to move us to a different cabin for the remainder of the cruise. We only had 1 night left. We took it. When we were packing up, I checked the bathroom one more time. The mirror had been fogged, even though no one had showered. And in the fog, there were 2 handprints pressed flat against the glass from the other side. The next story is called The Lifeboat Drill That Went Wrong. This one takes place on a repositioning cruise across the Atlantic. 2 weeks of open ocean with the same small group of people, except the numbers never quite added up. They counted us 3 times at the muster station and every time they came up with one extra person. The crew member with the clipboard kept recounting, touching each person's shoulder as he passed, mouthing the numbers. 26. Then he'd check his list. 25 assigned. He did it again. 26. This was a repositioning cruise from Fort Lauderdale to Southampton. 14 nights across the Atlantic. Not a lot of stops. Mostly open ocean. The kind of cruise where you get to know the same faces because there's nowhere else to go. Our muster station was Lifeboat Station 7, a small assembly area on deck 4 near the stern. We were a small group compared to the others. Mostly older couples, a few solo travelers. I was solo. I'd taken the trip after my father passed because he'd always wanted to cross the Atlantic by ship and never got the chance. The crew member eventually gave up recounting and moved on with the drill. I remember looking around at the group, trying to figure out who the extra person was. Everyone looked like they belonged. No one seemed confused or lost. But that night at dinner, I saw a man from the muster station sitting alone at a table near the window. I recognized him because he'd been standing next to me during the drill. Tall, thin, grey windbreaker, maybe late 50s. He wasn't eating. He was just sitting there with an empty place setting in front of him, looking out at the ocean. The strange part was the window. It was dark outside, completely black. There was nothing to see, but he was staring out like he was watching something specific. I saw him again the next day on the pool deck. Same windbreaker. He was standing at the railing, looking down at the water, not leaning casually, standing rigid, both hands on the rail like he was bracing himself. I nodded at him as I passed. He didn't react. On day 4, I checked the daily schedule in the elevator and noticed a small printed notice at the bottom. It said the ship's passenger count had been corrected and that all guests were accounted for. I didn't think much of it, but on day 5, the man in the grey windbreaker was gone. I didn't see him at breakfast. I didn't see him on the deck. I didn't see him anywhere. I asked the bartender at the pool bar if he'd seen the tall guy who always stood at the railing. He said he didn't know who I was talking about. I described him to 3 different crew members. None of them recognized the description. On day 6, I walked past his usual dinner table. There was no place setting. The table had been pushed against the wall with the chairs stacked on top, like it was being stored. I asked the maitre d' why that table was closed off. He said it had always been storage. That table was never in service. I spent the next 8 days crossing the Atlantic, eating in that dining room every night, looking at that table pushed against the wall. I kept waiting for the man to reappear. He never did. When we docked in Southampton, I went to guest services and asked about the extra person at the muster drill. The woman pulled up the records. She said the count for Lifeboat Station 7 was 25 for both the drill and disembarkation. Every single person was accounted for. I said there were 26. I was there. I counted too. She smiled politely and said sometimes guests get confused about which station they are assigned to. People wander to the wrong group and then correct themselves. But he didn't correct himself. He was at every meal. He was on that deck every day for 4 straight days. And then he was gone and no one remembered him. Sometimes when I'm near water at night, I catch myself staring out into the dark the way he did. Like there's something out there just past where the light reaches. I don't know what he was looking at, but I understand the impulse now. And that bothers me more than anything. And this next one is called The Photo from the Gangway Camera. A viewer sent this in about his brother, who went on a solo Caribbean cruise and came back a different person. Something followed him off the ship, and it had proof. My brother went on a cruise and came back different. Not different like he had a bad time. Different like something fundamental had shifted behind his eyes. He'd left as a loud, social, obnoxious guy who made everyone laugh. He came back quiet, measured, like he was being careful about something. He'd taken a 10-day Caribbean cruise out of Galveston. Solo. He said he needed a break. When he got back, he didn't want to talk about the trip. Not even the basics. Where he stopped, what he ate, nothing. He said it was fine. He said he slept a lot. That was it. 3 weeks later, he called me at 1 in the morning. He said he needed to tell me something, but I had to promise not to think he was crazy. I promised. He told me that on day 6 of the cruise, he went ashore at Cozumel. He spent the day in town, had lunch, walked around, and came back to the ship around 4 in the afternoon. Normal day. But when he got back to his cabin, something was wrong. His suitcase had been moved. Not opened, not searched. Moved. It had been on the luggage rack near the closet, and now it was on the bed, standing upright facing the door, like someone had placed it there deliberately. He checked inside. Everything was there. Nothing missing, nothing added, but it had been moved. He called housekeeping. They said no one had entered his cabin that day. His keycard log showed no entry between when he left at 9 in the morning and when he returned at 4. He let it go, but the next morning he found a photograph on his desk, a printed photo about 4 by 6, glossy. It was from the gangway camera, the camera that takes your picture as you board and leave the ship. It showed my brother walking down the gangway in Cozumel. He recognized the moment. He was wearing his blue shirt and sunglasses, but behind him, about 10 feet back, there was someone else on the gangway, a figure in dark clothing, slightly out of focus, and the figure was looking directly at the camera, not walking, not caught mid-stride, standing perfectly still on a moving gangway full of people, staring into the lens. My brother didn't know who it was. He'd never seen that person on the ship, but what disturbed him was the photo itself. Gangway photos aren't printed and delivered to your cabin. They are displayed on screens in the atrium for you to purchase. Someone had to have printed this specific frame and placed it in his room. He went to the photo desk and asked about it. They said they had no record of printing that image. He showed them the physical photo. The woman behind the counter looked at it for a long time. Then she said something that still bothers me. She said the timestamp on the gangway photo showed it was taken at 4:12 p.m. My brother returned to the ship at 4. He walked the gangway at 4, but the photo was taken at 4:12, 12 minutes after my brother had already boarded and gone to his cabin. Someone who looked like they were walking directly behind him was captured on that gangway. He asked if he could see the full sequence of gangway photos from that time window. They said the system had corrupted and all images between 4 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. were lost. Only the printed copy in his hand existed. My brother kept that photo. He showed it to me when he told me the story. I looked at the figure behind him. The clothes were dark. A black jacket, dark pants. The face was blurred just enough that you couldn't make out features, but the posture was clear. Whoever it was, they weren't walking. They were standing completely still on a gangway full of moving people, and they were looking at the camera like they knew it was there. I asked my brother what he did with the rest of the cruise. He said he stayed in his cabin 4 more days at sea, and he didn't leave that room once. I asked him why he really called me at 1 in the morning. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he found another photo that night on his kitchen table at home. Same glossy print, same gangway camera style, but this one showed the front of his apartment building, taken from across the street. The timestamp was from 3 hours before he called me. And this next story comes from someone who worked on a cruise ship, not as a guest but as crew. It's called The Crew Deck After Midnight. And I'll warn you now, this one involves a real disappearance. The details he describes about what led up to it are something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. I worked on a cruise ship for 11 months, and in that time, one member of our crew disappeared and was never found. That's not the story. The story is what happened in the weeks before he vanished. His name was Adan. He was a galley worker from the Philippines, mid-20s, quiet but friendly. We shared a corridor on Deck 0, the crew deck below the waterline where passengers never go. It's a different world down there. Narrow hallways, fluorescent lights that buzz, exposed pipework on the ceilings. The walls are thin enough that you can hear conversations in the cabin next to you. You learn to sleep through almost anything. Adan started acting strange about 3 weeks before he disappeared. He stopped eating in the crew mess. He'd take food back to his cabin and eat there alone. That's unusual because the crew mess is social. It's one of the only places you can relax on a ship where you work 16-hour shifts. People noticed. I asked him about it. He said he didn't like the way the hallway felt at night. I thought he meant noise, so I said something about earplugs. He looked at me and said no. He said the hallway was wrong at night. He said after midnight, the corridor outside his cabin was longer than it was during the day. I didn't know what to say to that. I thought he was exhausted. We all were. But a few days later, I was coming off a late shift, walking back to my cabin around 1 in the morning, and I noticed something I'd never noticed before. The corridor felt longer. I know that sounds impossible, and I know how hallways work on a ship. They are fixed, they don't change. But the walk from the stairwell to my cabin, which normally took about 45 seconds, took over 2 minutes that night. I counted the doors. There were more doors than there should have been. I counted again the next morning. The normal number, 16 doors between the stairwell and my cabin. That night after midnight, I counted again. 23. The extra doors were unmarked. No cabin numbers. Same grey paint, same handle style, but no numbers. I tried one. It was locked. I pressed my ear against it. Silence. Not the silence of an empty room. The silence of something that was holding very still. I told Adan the next day. He just nodded. He said he'd been counting for 2 weeks. He said the number of extra doors was increasing. When he first noticed, there were 2, then 5, then 7. He said he'd started mapping it. He showed me a notebook. He'd drawn the corridor layout every night for 14 nights. In his drawings, the corridor grew by roughly 1 door every 2 days, and on each new door, he'd pressed his ear and listened. He said most were silent, but 3 of them, he'd heard breathing on the other side. I told him to report it. He said he had. He'd told his supervisor, who told him to get more sleep. He'd told the ship's doctor, who suggested seasickness medication. No one took it seriously. 4 days before Adan disappeared, I walked the corridor at 1:30 in the morning and counted 29 doors. The hallway was visibly longer. The far end, where the stairwell should have been visible, just faded into more hallway. More doors. The fluorescent lights seemed dimmer the further you looked. I turned around and went back the way I came. 2 days before he disappeared, Adan told me he'd opened one of the unmarked doors. He said it was identical to his cabin. Same layout, same furniture, same bedding. But there was someone in the bed. He said the shape under the blanket was exactly his size. He said he could see the outline of his own body, sleeping. He closed the door and ran. The night Adan disappeared, I heard his cabin door open at 2 in the morning. I heard footsteps going down the corridor, not toward the stairwell, the other direction, toward the part of the hallway that shouldn't exist. I didn't follow. The ship searched for him for 3 days. They checked every deck, every storage room, every camera. The official report said he likely went overboard. Case closed. But here's what I never told anyone. The morning after he disappeared, I counted the doors on my corridor during daylight. 16 as always. But his door, Adan's cabin door, didn't have a number on it anymore. Same grey paint, same handle, but the number plate was gone, like it had never been there. I finished my contract 2 months later and never went back to sea. Last I heard, that cabin still doesn't have a number, and no one has been assigned to it since. And this last story is the one that stayed with me the longest. It's called The Passenger Manifest from the Return Voyage. It was sent in by a former port agent in the Bahamas, and it involves a discrepancy in passenger numbers that shouldn't be possible. I'll let him explain. I need to be careful about how I say this because parts of it are still under investigation, and I signed paperwork I probably shouldn't have signed. But enough time has passed, and I think people need to know. I was a port agent in Nassau, Bahamas. My job was logistics, coordinating passenger counts, customs paperwork, medical disembarkations, that kind of thing. I worked the port 3 to 4 days a week, handling anywhere from 2 to 5 ships per day. After a while, it becomes routine. Numbers in, numbers out. You stop thinking about the people attached to the numbers. In March of 2019, a mid-sized cruise ship docked on a Tuesday morning. About 2,200 passengers, standard Caribbean itinerary. Nothing unusual. I processed the arrival manifest, cross-checked with customs, and everything matched. 2,214 passengers. Normal. The ship was in port for 8 hours. Passengers went ashore, came back the usual. At departure, I processed the return manifest. I counted twice because the number didn't match. 2,217 passengers. 3 extra people. That happens sometimes. Crew members get miscounted. Shore excursion staff boards temporarily. Sometimes a port worker gets counted accidentally. I flagged it and sent it to the ship's purser for correction. Standard procedure. The purser called me back within 20 minutes. He said the count was correct. 2,217. He said 3 individuals had boarded during the port call who were not on the original manifest. He asked me if I had processed any late bookings or emergency boardings. I hadn't. No one boards a cruise ship mid-voyage through a port agent. That's not how it works. He said he'd handle it internally and asked me to log the discrepancy. I did. 2 days later, the ship returned to its home port in Miami. I wasn't involved in the Miami processing, but I had a contact there. Another port agent. I called her and asked her to check the disembarkation count. She called me back that evening. 2,211. 6 fewer than departed Nassau. 3 fewer than the original manifest. 3 passengers from the original booking were not on board when the ship arrived in Miami. And the 3 extra passengers who boarded in Nassau, they weren't on board either. 6 people gone. No overboard alarms. No medical evacuations. No tender transfers. They were simply not on the ship when it docked. I started asking questions. My contact in Miami said the cruise line had already sealed the passenger records for that voyage. The families of the 3 missing original passengers had been contacted. All 3 had been traveling solo. All 3 had cabins on the same deck. Deck 12 forward section. I pulled the Nassau arrival manifest and cross-referenced it with the departure manifest. The 3 extra passengers who boarded had been assigned cabins. That shouldn't be possible. I didn't assign them. The purser claimed he didn't assign them, but they had cabin numbers in the system. The cabins they were assigned to were the same 3 cabins that belonged to the 3 passengers who later went missing. Let me say that again. 3 people who were not on the original manifest boarded in Nassau and were logged into cabins that were already occupied by existing passengers. And by the time the ship reached Miami, all 6, the 3 originals and the 3 extras, were gone. I filed a formal report. The cruise line's corporate office contacted me and sent a legal team to Nassau. They had me sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a consultancy fee that was large enough to make me uncomfortable. They told me the matter was being investigated by the cruise line's internal security and that involving external authorities would compromise the investigation. I signed, but I kept a copy of both manifests. I compared the names. The 3 original passengers were Michael Ferris, Diana Caulfield, and Robert Young. The 3 extra passengers were listed as M. Ferris D, Caulfield, and R. Young. The same names, not similar. The same. 3 people boarded that ship in Nassau with the same names as 3 passengers already on board. They were assigned to the same cabins, and within 48 hours, all 6 were gone. I don't work at the port anymore. I left about 4 months after this happened. The cruise line is still operating. That ship is still sailing. I've checked the public records, and there were no missing persons reports filed for any of those 3 names. No news coverage. No lawsuits. It's like those 6 people never existed in the first place. The last thing I'll say is this. About a month before I quit, I was processing another ship. Different line, different vessel, and the departure manifest came back with 1 extra passenger. I flagged it. The purser corrected it within the hour and said it was a clerical error. But for that 1 hour, I looked at the name of the extra passenger. It was mine.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.